we have all these like universal human struggles, like feeling like an imposter, fear of failure, fear of rejection, public speaking, being an introvert.
Michaela, thank you so much for being here on To Market. It's always really cool for me since this is a fairly young show when I can get really influential voices to agree to join me. So first, I just want to start by thanking you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I always love talking to students. So
That's awesome. Yeah, and my students, I think this is going to be a really interesting interview for them because I always really push my students onto the LinkedIn platform. And I think most of them, even after some convincing, believe it's really just a kind of resume publicizing tool, but there's so much more that you can do with it. And I think you're kind of the exemplar in what you can do to get the most out of LinkedIn. So we'll talk a lot about LinkedIn, and I think maybe the best place to start is if you can just give us a kind of a summary of your journey, because I believe your journey in becoming a LinkedIn influencer started maybe as recently as 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. So if you could kind of tell us about your career journey and how you got where you are today, I think that's a great place to start.
Ooh, well, my career journey starts about 8 years ago. And marketing was something that I kind of fell into. You know, I had done all sorts of things, went to school for film studies and legal studies, ended up, instead of taking my LSATs, traveling for a year bartending. And came back, kind of fell into marketing. And was kind of doing, you know, what I thought everybody else was doing, which is kind of finding that stable career, something to pay the bills, something that, you know, made you a responsible human. And, you know, I thought that enjoying what you did was a huge luxury. And I thought that, you know, 90% of the days could be bad. And if you had 10%, then you were ahead of the curve. And so I spent a long time kind of like going from job to job, and really not finding exactly what I wanted. And in March of 2016, I was laid off from the tech startup that I was working at. And that was a pretty big jump because I had gone from, you know, working those 13-hour days, anybody that works in a startup knows what I'm talking about, it's a huge grind, to not working at all. And not only that, but I was also about a month away from my 30th birthday. And for me, I think 30 was a big year for a couple of reasons. I mean, well, I kind of like looked at what my parents were doing at 30. You know, my dad at that time had like 4 kids. You know, my mom had already had my sister and was married and had her teaching job. So that was one side of it. The other side of it was that, you know, you have these long plans, and I think everybody has a blueprint of what their life is supposed to look like, whether you want to admit it or not. And for me, I thought 30 was when you had it all together. So I'd have the perfect family, the nice house, stable career. And what I found instead was that not only did I have none of those things, but I also couldn't keep a job for more than, you know, 2 to 3 years. And so I talked to some recruiters, and, you know, they assured me that it would take no time at all for me to find another job. But part of me didn't want to just find another job. And I also thought that the way that we've been looking for jobs for such a long time was really outdated, which is send out a whole bunch of resumes and hope that some company thinks that you're good enough to hire. And so I'm all about using time effectively, and I hate being at home not working. So what I did was I put a tracking code on 10 resumes and sent them out to 10 companies that were looking for somebody like me, because I wanted to see how many of them were actually open. Because I think a huge problem when it comes to being a job seeker is that your confidence takes a huge hit, right? And in my head, I was like, okay, well, I'm sending out all these resumes, and so many people do this where they just feel terrible about themselves because, well, if you send you know, 100 resumes and nobody reads them or nobody's giving you a call back, then there must be something wrong with you. And so I wanted to test this theory because I'm a marketer and weird like that. So sent out 10 and only one of them was open. So that was a turning point for me where I was like, okay, well, I need to figure out exactly what I'm looking for in a career because I'm just waiting for things to happen to me. And two, I need to start showing what I know and what I'm made of rather than just sitting around and waiting for a company to tell me that I'm good enough. So I started writing on LinkedIn in the winter of 2016. So actually pretty much exactly 2 years ago. And my first article went viral in March of 2016, which was called How I Landed My Dream Job in 2 Weeks on LinkedIn. I had used LinkedIn exclusively to find work, decided that I was not going to send out a single resume. I thought that that system was so outdated. And turns out I was right because I was, interviewing 3 or 4 times a day, which I assure you just doesn't happen. But what I found was that there was also a lot of strength in community. I always thought that the only people that would care about me were people like my, close friends, family members. And what I found instead was by putting myself out there and saying, look, this is the type of role that I'm looking for. This is what I bring to the table. If you guys know of any openings, just let me know. Seeing people become invested in that story was so inspiring because I had people that I had never met in person that were reaching out to me and inviting me in to interview just because I had shown kind of like a bold move. And when that post went viral, I had to take a step back because it went against everything that I thought to be true about content creation on social media. It was totally unpolished. It was filled with all these like memes that I had ripped off from the internet. I had written in like half an hour. And, but the thing is that it had a few components that were true for all social media in terms of going viral. So it was relational, it was conversational, and it was helpful. My motive wasn't to go viral or to generate all sorts of new followers, but it was just to help other job seekers that I felt were in the same position as me and say, hey guys, I found this new way of doing things that I think that would be helpful for you. And so that kind of, right off the bat, I was hooked on that type of writing because I thought that there was all sorts of space for things that people just weren't talking about on LinkedIn. Things like fear of failure, maintaining confidence throughout the job search, job interviews gone wrong, reporting harassment in the workplace. All of these things that I had been dealing with that I thought other people need to know that I'm dealing with them because there's a strength in not feeling alone. And so I spent the last 2 years basically just writing articles, sharing updates of what's going on in my career, being as open and transparent as possible about my challenges. And I've been lucky enough that it's really resonated with a lot of people. So I've gone from a few hundred to over 110,000 followers. But even more than that, I've been able to basically create the career that I was hoping for rather than just waiting for great things to happen to me.
That's so cool. And I think one thing that's so great about the content you create on LinkedIn is that it's personally relevant to just about everyone on that platform. And it's really hard to do that on the other platforms. Usually you have to kind of find your niche, but almost everyone on LinkedIn is interested. Either they're trying to find people to hire or they're trying to get a job themselves. So I think that in terms of if you have to figure out how to align your content to what people on a platform are looking for, what you've done with career advice is just fantastic. So congratulations for that.
Yes.
You talked a lot about community. So I wonder, now that you have 110,000 people in your LinkedIn community, has it been hard for you to maintain that with consistency or to keep things kind of as close as they were before?
Yes. I mean, there's definitely, it's a huge challenge going from a few hundred where, you can talk to the same people every single day or every couple days to 110,000 people that you genuinely do want to connect with, but there's just not enough hours in the day and you are sacrificing things like family, friends, rest, play, creativity, and all those things. So that definitely is a challenge. I think that I am super solution focused. So part of the reason, I love public speaking, period, but a big reason why I've kind of moved more towards speaking publicly is because I feel like that's a good opportunity for me to meet the people that have been following me and connect with them in person, because I think that that's something that is completely irreplaceable. I love social media so much, but I will be the first person to say that there is nothing like a face-to-face conversation where you can have, these heartfelt conversations with people that are sharing the same challenges as you. So that's kind of the way that I've been approaching that, is just by getting out there as much as possible, which is tough because I am an introvert. But it's so worth it.
Okay, good. I'm introverted too, so I want to ask you about this because I've just started to offer some workshops locally and things like that. And yeah, I always get really nervous in preparation and at the moment before I go on stage, so to speak. But I've also been teaching for several years now, so it should feel more natural maybe than it is. So what's that transition like, going from kind of like online well-known personality to putting yourself out there as a public speaker? I know the travel schedule is probably crazy for you. You have the introversion kind of always, nagging you. So what has that been like?
I've been really lucky that I haven't built my brand on perfection. So I've never tried to be this super like powerful, serious businesswoman. That's never been my brand. I've always been about trying to be as open about my vulnerabilities as possible. So I talk about, the fact that when I speak, I get nervous hives, and it's something that I literally can't hide. So I might as well just talk about it. And I love to talk about the challenges of getting on stage and showing what that process looks like. So I think that the best way to kind of move into a more like spotlighted role is to talk about the fact that it's nerve wracking. I think if you go out there and act like you're this perfect robot, then people are going to be pretty hesitant to listen to what you have to say. But I think that if you are genuine and share your struggles, I think that just makes you more approachable. And I just find that more people are rooting for, I don't want to say the underdog, but the person that has the same values as them. So yeah, I've been doing that. And then the other thing is telling people what you need. So I have spent the last week traveling and doing all sorts of things that scare me to death. And I've been very, very focused on making sure that people know that I cannot hang out with them. So there's a lot of people, like, when I was going to Toronto, that wanted to have coffee before or after, or have dinner afterwards. And my focus was just on rest and relaxation, because I need that to be able to get through some of these hard times. So I think being very honest about the fact that you are introverted, and the way that you energize and then re-energize is through rest and solo time, I think is really important. I think a lot of people really appreciate that kind of honesty too, rather than just saying, oh no, I'm busy, I'm sorry. Just being open about the fact that you need that to actually perform.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. And it's actually reminds me of one thing that surprised me about LinkedIn. I really started engaging with LinkedIn in December after the fall semester ended, and I had talked so much to my students about how they needed to be on LinkedIn and needed to have better profiles and needed to be finding companies and people at these companies to look for jobs. I looked at my own profile and it was like 5 years out of date. So I started to engage with the activity feed there, and the most popular people, their stuff is not polished at all. They might have captions on their videos or something like that, but it's very natural and authentic, and they're not in studios and things like that. So that was surprising, but I think it does show that the audience is valuing that authentic connection over something that's really produced, right?
Yeah. I think that as a society, we're just craving real so much. I just started kind of expanding a little bit more into Instagram and sharing some of the behind the scenes moments that I have before I go and speak. And that was a spot that especially I would look at it, and, you see the highlight reels of everybody else, and, they have the perfect bodies and the perfect families and the perfect vacations. And it's hard to know where you fit in there. But I think there's so much hunger for people that are okay with turning on the camera when all you want to do is shut out the world. And so for me, anytime I'm feeling scared or lonely or I'm going through a challenge, I turn the camera on myself. And I think that makes a really big difference. In terms of, being polished, yeah, definitely. I think that I've tried, trust me, I've tried. I've gotten professional photographers and taken beautiful photos, and I post them and it's like crickets. And then I post, this like selfie of me like working in the moment, and people go nuts. And so I think it really is that, okay, I've seen enough of like the perfect polished highlight reel. Give me like the real stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense too. And I think that it's medium specific, right? So if we see stuff that's not polished on television, it just feels like it doesn't fit in or doesn't fit that prototype. But and maybe that could be a good thing ultimately. So if LinkedIn becomes a whole feed of unpolished videos, then maybe the really polished person is going to stand out. But as of now, it seems like people really, like you said, they're yearning for this authenticity, and maybe that's because of the type of content we're getting on other platforms like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. So I think that's really cool. So obviously LinkedIn is your favorite platform. How active are you on the other platforms? Is it mostly Instagram?
I'm pretty active. I try to do what I can. I think that there is a lot of value in specializing. I think for me, I've spent the last 2 years really trying to nail down LinkedIn, what the community looks like, what the content should look like, what works, what doesn't, the rules of engagement. And now I've kind of been spending a little bit more time on Instagram and using especially stories, because I just love storytelling in general. And I think that the content can be a little bit different than and less polished than on LinkedIn, which I really like. Spending as much time as possible on Twitter and Facebook. But really, at the end of the day, I think that something that I'm embracing this year is balance, and not feeling that pressure to be everywhere and do all the things, and being okay with not being good at something. And I'm definitely not great at Facebook or Twitter. I'm way too long-winded for Twitter. And that's fine. I think that's completely fine. I think that it's really important to find your place in your community and be using social media intentionally. I think that so many people will just kind of be scrolling through and not getting any sort of value. But for me, if I'm spending time on any platform and it's just me comparing and feeling bad about myself, that is a terrible use of time. I think that the only reason that you should be using social media is to connect, to feel empowered, to be inspired, to be motivated. And if you're not doing any of those things, it's time to log off.
Right. Yeah, and it seems like the people like you and other influencers who kind of get really good at a specific channel and then start to branch out, you still kind of have this home base where you feel really comfortable. Like Gary V, right? Gary Vaynerchuk is probably like YouTube and Twitter, but obviously he's everywhere now since he's internationally known and all this stuff. But still, he's most comfortable there. So so maybe that's part of it too. It's like you start to branch out, but you still know where you really belong. And maybe you share more content there, or the content's a little deeper, or you spin that content off into the other social media channels in some way.
Yeah.
And you do have a background in content marketing. So I'm guessing LinkedIn isn't the answer for every person and every company in terms of where they should get started. I do think it's a good place for my MBA students and my undergrads to get started if they're looking to venture out into the world of social media. But how do you pick the best platform? So if you're going to specialize, is it going to be Twitter or Facebook? Is it just where you feel comfortable, or is there more to it than that?
Well, I think that it's, where you feel most comfortable, where your people are. And you have to start thinking about your own strengths as well. So for me, I looked at Twitter, and I know that I'm a writer, and it's not really necessarily a great place for a writer that loves writing long form content. Facebook and Instagram was, quite honestly, just really intimidating for me. I just thought that there were so many people that were doing what I wanted to do that I just didn't know if there was a place yet. And I saw LinkedIn, and I was like, okay, well, you have LinkedIn articles, so I can write long form content. I love sharing photos and videos and things like that, and nobody else was doing it at the time. So I thought that was interesting. And I love the idea that I could talk about challenges that I was having that nobody else was really having those conversations. So I think it's knowing where your people are, but also knowing what kind of strengths you have. If you're a funny person and you can like whip up like those one-liners like no one's business, like Twitter might be the best spot for you. Or if you're a very visual person, maybe you're good at photography, you're a creative person, Instagram might be like your perfect spot. Or if you're into doing live videos and all of that good stuff, Facebook might be a great spot for you. So I think it's really important to experiment, because you might find that where you land is not where you expected. And that was definitely true for me. But wherever you go, just make sure that it's not a task on your to-do list. It's someplace that you really just genuinely love hanging out, because you're going to be spending a whole lot of time on that platform, especially when you're getting started trying to build it up.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great advice. I really want to do the live video. You mentioned Facebook live video, but my audience is small now, so I'm so worried that no one will show up. But someone else told me your audience is already at 0, so it can only go up from there. So we'll see. Maybe next year or something like that. I'll give it a whirl. I want to circle back to LinkedIn for a moment, in terms of trying to look for work. So some people, and even I've used this advice in the past, say like get the premium LinkedIn. That way you can do really deep searches and find the people you want to connect with. Did you do that when you were involved in your job search, or did you do everything through the free site?
So I had about a $20 budget when I started to launch my personal brand. And I used that to go out and get a tripod that looked a little bit like this. So you just hook up your phone and then a camera remote, because people were criticizing my selfies, and I found out that if you took a photo and you have both hands in the photo, it's not considered a selfie, which is interesting. And then I bought a tiny whiteboard, which I used because I love writing inspirational quotes and things that are motivating me. And then I would share those with my network, and a notebook, because I just found that there were so many experiences that I was having throughout the day that I'm like, I wonder if other people can relate to this. And so I would just write down all the ideas in a notebook. So I think that was probably the best use of $20 ever, because it really helped me launch it. In terms of the premium brand, I think that we tend to get really caught up in the tactics when it comes to building anything. So if you're going to the gym for the first time, you got to have like the Lululemon like clothes, you got to have the perfect running shoes, you got to have like that armband where you can put your phone into. And you don't need that stuff to get started. And in fact, I think that you should always start small. So when it comes to LinkedIn, I have used not the premium version, but the Sales Navigator, which is very similar to the premium version. And I will say, I mean, I'm a different case, because most of the people that I want to connect with, I have access to them. So I don't necessarily need the email credits. But I think that there is so much that you can do on the platform on the free version that is where you should start. And then once you become more active, then sure, maybe you want to go and try and upgrade and see what that looks like. Then go for it. But you definitely don't need to spend money to get started. And there are so many features that people just do not use. Like my number one tip is, so I have on my phone right now about 1,500 pending connection requests. And I would say about 5 or 6 of them actually have left me a personal note. And I think that's a really huge area of growth for a lot of people, is making sure that you leave that personal note anytime you connect with somebody. So like little things like that are a great way to just take advantage of the personal one. And then once you become more comfortable, or you find that you're really, really active on the platform, then sure, go ahead and upgrade.
Okay, I think that makes sense. And since I am kind of new to new LinkedIn. I was comfortable with it in 2008 when I was working on my MBA, but
It's changed a lot.
Yeah, the activity feed is just crazy now. And even the profile, I noticed that in your summary section, you can add videos and things like that. Yes. So I'm trying to decide whether I should encourage students to make a 30-second pitch video or a 1-minute pitch video, thinking that it can't hurt unless it's terrible, right? So there are a lot of options now, which I think is cool. And I don't really know where LinkedIn is heading. I imagine they know where they're heading. What do you think? Because video seems to kind of be, it's taking over my feed now. I don't know if it's the people that I'm connected to or if they're really pushing this on everyone.
Yeah, they are. So the LinkedIn algorithm changed about a month ago. And they gave me a few details. They're pretty vague about the details, but there's definitely a change in terms of them pushing video big time. So posts that I used to have, my format is always long form content with a photo, and those have gone from minimum 1,000 likes per post to about 300, 350. And any posts with a photo, you'll notice that they're hitting that 350 mark and then they're done. So they're throttling the growth of photos. They have switched over to video. Video has not taken a hit. If anything, I've seen a boost in my video content. I think that that's going to change. I think that there's some issues with pushing video. Number one being that people will grab viral videos from outside the platform and be sharing them online, which equals a heck of a lot of video spam in your newsfeed. And the second thing is that you can't necessarily just tell people what they should be producing. So somebody like me, like, sure, I can create video content, but my strength is in long form writing and photos. So I think, and I'm starting to see that already, there's conversations of people just saying that they don't want to watch videos. And LinkedIn is a very different platform than other ones in the fact that professionals are using it throughout the workdays. Are professionals really going to be sitting down and scrolling through videos all day? I personally don't think so. That's not how I use the platform. That's not how most people are using the platform. So I think that there's going to be some issues there as well. That said, I think the video, like, I've seen so many fun videos. I think it's really interesting to watch how people are using them. I know that it's been a fun challenge for me to figure out how I can use video but still have my signature style incorporated into it. So that's probably the biggest change that I think you'll see. I think that you're going to see a lot more integrations with Microsoft products. I foresee definitely them integrating Skype into LinkedIn. It just seems like a no-brainer, so that you're not having to coordinate video conferences outside the platform. You're going to be able to connect with people via video directly through the platform. Would be great. So yeah, it should be an exciting year, but it's definitely changed a lot in the last 6 months.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. You got me thinking now that you mentioned Skype. It would be cool to have like live webinars or something like that through Skype on LinkedIn. That would be really cool. And then that is something you could watch at work, right? Because it's very focused. And more of and I've found just personally the videos that work best for me seem to be well, first of all, they have to be pretty short. I found quickly that anything over 5 minutes, just no one's interested. But stuff that's kind of like shortened versions of Skillshare, where it's like 1 minute of you showing someone how to do something. I think that captures interest, but like you said, I don't know what the shelf life looks like, because most of what I see now is exactly what you described. I'll see a video on Twitter on Tuesday, and then Friday it's this viral thing on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And the person posts it without any credit, and it's just kind of annoying. Yeah. But it's new, so we'll see where it goes. But the good thing about having 110,000 followers is that no matter what it does, right, you'll be able to adapt and have a pretty good audience. Because like to someone like me, 350 likes sounds pretty good, but I can understand if it's throttled down from 1,000, that would be super frustrating, especially if you were one of the the early kind of pioneers of the activity feed. So it's really fascinating. And obviously LinkedIn's not the only platform struggling with what to do with their algorithm. Snapchat and Facebook and all these others have overhauled their algorithms recently, and Facebook especially has really detrimentally affected some companies where, they're going out of business now because they don't have the reach that they used to with video. So it's really interesting. So I want to be mindful of your time. I feel like I've already exceeded what I told you I was going to use up, but I want to ask you one more question and then get some contact information so that if people want to follow you, they'll be able to do that. But you've written about millennials and reaching millennials. So as a Gen Xer who spends a lot of time in the classroom as a professor talking about how to market to millennials. And of
Mhm.
course, keep in mind, my audience is millennials. So I
Mhm.
feel like half the time I don't know what the hell I'm talking about on that topic. So if you have any advice or kind of secret magic for people like me who are trying, because we always lean on, oh, well, you got to be on Instagram and just try to figure out where the millennials are.
Mhm.
But have you found anything that's really ineffective that people like me are trying to do? Or
Yeah,
something
I
that
think,
really works well?
well, I think talking about millennials rather than talking to millennials is really a big problem right now. I think that the way that I've seen, and the reason that I started writing about it was only because I've just seen so many articles, and I figured that it made sense for a millennial to actually talk about how to speak to millennials.
Right.
But I think that this kind of like focus on millennials, like we're this like different species, it just doesn't make sense. And I think that it's not one thing or the other. And I, at my current role as president of Grade A Digital, I deal with all sorts of age groups. And the biggest resistance that I see is that, a millennial comes in super like tech savvy and entitled and all of these stereotypes where there's so much room for different generations to work together. So yes, I mostly grew up around technology and I can help you set up a Snapchat account, but you can talk to me about your career experiences and about life. And I think that it's really important to know that there's room for both generations or multiple generations. It's not one way or the other. And we really do need each other to be able to grow. So I think rather than spending time trying to dissect a millennial's mind, just reaching out and offering assistance and offering mentorship. Like like mentors are probably the biggest way that like I've been able to grow in my career. And I just think that there's so much room for different generations to learn from each other that I would love to just see more connections between multiple generations.
I think that makes perfect sense. And we have this, at least on social media, there's this bizarre fixation on all the industries millennials are destroying, but not much focus on all the industries that millennials are propping up. So I think, like you said, just not, maybe not even saying millennials explicitly, but just trying to know your audience, know your connections, know your customers, makes sense
Exactly.
without, obviously there's room for segmentation, but not this fixation on, oh, these people are way too different to classify with anybody else. I think makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think that like when it comes to my writing, if you look at the people that are commenting, it's not one age group. We have all these like universal human struggles, like feeling like an imposter, fear of failure, fear of rejection, public speaking, being an introvert, entrepreneurship. Like there's all sorts of themes that it's not one group that is dealing with. And I think that once we focus more on our similarities rather than our differences, we're going to see a lot of room for more growth.
Right, that's awesome. Well, Michaela, thank you so much. This has been a very insightful interview, and I think that it's really going to help my students figure out how to get started with LinkedIn. And
Mhm.
if any of them are interested in taking the path of trying to build themselves up as an influencer, I think also you've provided kind of a nice roadmap there.
Yay.
What are the best ways for people to follow you? So LinkedIn, is that number one?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is where I share a lot of my like career milestones and stuff that I'm reading, things that I'm working on. So that's good to follow if you're into that kind of stuff. And then on Instagram, I tend to share a lot of the behind the scenes. So when I do speaking engagements or I'm doing something that's really outside of my comfort zone, I kind of will share some of the behind the scenes. I also share book recommendations and kind of more fun, entertaining stuff. Facebook, I tend to share basically what I'm sharing on the other platforms, so probably don't follow me there. Twitter, I'm sharing a lot of the interviews that I do and any of the articles that I'm a part of and things like that.
All right, awesome. And I'll drop links to all that stuff in the show notes too to make it hopefully easier for everybody. But thank you so much for your time. This has been a pleasure, and like I said, I'm really thrilled that you agreed to come on my new show. And I think you even mentioned in your reply that you'll do anything for students, right? That you just really were interested in connecting with students, and I think that's just so cool of you. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, have a great one. Thank you.
Bye.